Good morning and welcome to our 26th show and tell of the project that is aiming to reduce the number of invalid planning applications that are submitted nationally across the country. In many councils, that's up to 50%, but in some areas, even more are received invalid. And those poor applicants wanting to simply build an extension are left pulling their hair out before trying to get it right. So welcome also to those watching on the broadcast. Please post any comments and questions in the chat that you see there, and we'll cover them in our Q&A session nearer to the end of the session. It's been a truly collaborative project. There on the slide are the partners. And of course, we've been working with our amazing developers and user researcher, Open Systems Lab and LAM respectively, and our newly appointed content designer, Stephen Shuker. As always, all the links to our social media are there, and you can find out more on the project website, RIPA.digital, which you can see there as well. So we're at a huge milestone, really exciting phase with the launch of our private beta for Law 4 development certificates. This means that real applicants will start submitting real applications through our system. The tool should help them do so without making errors and their application being made invalid, and save everyone time and money. But also launching is our sister project, the Southwark-led BOPS back office planning system, which is taking our data that we're collecting from our applicants and taking that data, not documents approach into the back office system. And will make planning officers' assessment and determination of applications more fluid, more intuitive, and simpler to use and navigate. So again, more time and money saved. Well, we've come a long way. From trying out iterative design with Lego bricks to now being pros with Trello boards and sprints. And we have a lot to be pleased and proud about, but just a brief pat on our collective backs, because we know we still have a long way to go on our mission. There are lots more applications that need a modernising dust in the system. Here's what's coming up this morning. Those watching our last show and tell will know that the partners are so busy getting ready for this launch that we've had this week, that it's just going to be me giving a very high level run through on behalf of all of the partners involved in the last sprint's events. So what have we been up to this sprint? Well, we held our regular weekly user research and design sessions where we discussed things such as what application types we could test next. You can see a list there. You can also see the images there showing part of the scenario testing, which has been drawn up by the partners for Class E, which is retail to retail. So this is, I think it's shops to cafe, cafe to shops on this one. So that will be a route to be tested by LAM, our user researcher, in the next round. We also discussed CIL, and for those not in the know, that's Community Infrastructure Levy. CIL is a charge which can be levied by planning authorities, although not all councils have introduced it. If they haven't, there's a need to do consultation and draw up a charging fee schedule. The main purpose of CIL is to help finance wider infrastructure needed to support ongoing development. So that's helping to deliver things like transport, schools, health facilities and parks, which are needed to support the development of an area. We don't actually think it's likely to affect that many for our private beta, but we just need to ensure we warn anyone where we think there's a possibility a proposal could be still liable. We also discussed payments. The new system takes payments, and some agents may arrange normally for their clients to pay the council directly. Some agents will pay and on their behalf and bill for the charge. But either way, we need to be clear with the users who are signed up for the private beta that they're aware they need to pay as part of the tool. We've also had lots of discussions with comms. As you can see, there are a snippet from the landing page that the team have created as well for users who've registered an interest. Oh, and I mean, loads of it. This is just a snapshot of what we've been doing, but we've been developing our approach to prioritising the development roadmap with more direct involvement from all of the partner councils. Partners met to go over with the BOPS team to agree a standardised text that will form templates for letters that come out of the BOPS system, such as application received, application valid, and so on. And this shows how the two projects are becoming ever more entwined in the way in which we work and progress things. And we went over with our user researcher, Lam, who's on leave this week, the dashboard that has been built that is capturing on one page the feedback from all of the user testing we've been doing throughout beta since June 2020 when we first started the beta phase. So this means we'll be able to properly track issues through different iterations of the service, be able to see how many times it comes up as an issue instead of having to read back through lots of different tabs on worksheets. And we'll be able to analyse progress more easily. And we also had our first meeting with our new content designer. Now, normally I'd be handing you over to Lam now, but as I mentioned, she's on leave this week. But I'm really pleased to introduce you now to Stephen from Nemensa, who's our new content designer. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Catherine. So as Catherine said, this is my first week on the project. To get up to speed quickly, I've been meeting with lots of team members who've been very generous with their time. And I've done lots of background reading. I'm learning to love the GPDO. I've started QAing the existing content on the beta service, looking for quick wins to improve the user experience. I'm also looking at the select all the changes component, a key stage in the application form, to understand the pain points and collaborate with the team to see where improvements can be made. My onboarding process has been fast and smooth, thanks to a very engaged and accessible team, so thank you very much. In terms of my knowledge, well, to quote a dearly departed Secretary of State, I'm currently quickly progressing from unknown unknowns to known unknowns, with the ultimate goal of reaching known knowns bliss. That's it from me, Catherine. Back to you.
Thanks, Stephen. So, well, it's now over to Open Systems Lab a lot sooner than normal. Alistair, I'm assuming you're taking control.
Yeah, I will do shortly. Thanks very much, Catherine. I will let me do that now. Cool. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Catherine. I mean, obviously, yeah, this is quite a cool week because, as Catherine's already described, this is the first week where we've got people submitting actual applications through the service, which is obviously a very, very cool kind of milestone to reach. And it's sort of a kind of yeah, it's been a long way to get here, and it's, you know, it's an endeavor that's required a huge number of people to kind of build that point. So, you know, huge kind of credit to kind of all the partners who've kind of got this amazing diversity of knowledge within the partner group, and just outside it. You know, incredible commitment from, you know, partners, incredible teams working up both on the kind of OSL side, building this incredible logic engine that drives this thing. Then also on Box, on the BOP side, you know, a huge amount of sort of effort that's gone into this, plus also then, you know, the teams at MHCLG supporting this whole thing. So, and we've learned, you know, a lot as we were going, and we're still learning, and there's going to be a lot more that we're going to be learning. You know, even more so now as our first sort of brave guinea pig applicants start submitting their applications through it for the first time. But so in a way, there's a kind of moment to mark the achievement of where we've got to, but also a kind of what I wanted to do this morning was sort of reflect on that and remind ourselves collectively this really is a kind of what we call an MVP, what we call a minimum viable product. So there's so much about the service now which is usable, it's safe, you know, but there's so much about it that isn't perfect yet. And so I thought what might be quite interesting would be to kind of run through an application through the service, but as I go through along the way, I'm just going to kind of flag up some of the things that we know are not perfect and are very much on the radar as things that over the next and the medium long term we're going to be turning our attentions and focusing on fixing and improving, you know, as we go. So actually I'll open the service in a minute. The first thing is immediately obvious when you open the service, which is this thing here, which is that at the moment we have what Michael, our delivery manager, kind of lovingly termed an infinite survey. So it's sort of one question after another, which in some contexts is really quite nice, but at other moments it can make the service feel incredibly long to users. So and what we have at the moment is the slightly odd things which are essentially proxies for what will be section headers. So what you will see when you begin the service in future, there's a feature we're going to be looking at some point we call pages feature. and pages with sections, where you'll be able to kind of see your progress, see your journey through the application. So we already know from some of the user testing that LAM has done. And by the way, I should, I listed all the people who've contributed to the project. I shouldn't omit from that list the amazing volunteers we've had for user testing this thing, because we've learned a load from them. And we already know from them that this is going to make it significantly improve the kind of the experience of the service. There's also a lot of other general navigation features. So there's a lot of accessibility features that we're going to be focusing on a quite high priority, I think. And also some of the general navigation features. So, and I'll touch on a couple of those as we go through, but one of the really important ones, which is sort of here represented by that little bookmark symbol in the top right hand corner, is the ability to save and return to your application. So at the moment, when you're using the application, you're using the service, you'll notice that you can close your browser and you can reopen your browser as long as it's not in private browsing mode. You'll be able to close your browser, reopen your browser, go back to the same link, and you'll be able to pick up your application where you left off. But that's not, it's not really very kind of robust. You can't do multiple applications at one time. You can't kind of, so you can't share it with other people. And we know that this is a really big user need, is to be able to share the application with people. So being able to have that thing where you can just bookmark it or email yourself a link, what we call a magic link, to be able to sort of do your application in multiple sessions. And I'll touch again as I go through on some of the reasons why we know users will probably, even though we've worked really hard to make it possible to do an application much more quickly than ever before, even though it's dealing with more information in some ways within the application, we know that or rather we predict that, we could be wrong, most people will do it in at least two sessions, separate sessions. So we'll talk a bit about that. So let's jump over to the actual service here, and we'll kind of go through. And strangely enough, so I had a conversation yesterday. So Catherine suggested that, or Catherine's idea was, jogged me to think we should run through a project which we haven't actually run through before, which is installing a heat pump to a house. So let's run through that. So the first thing you'll see here is that this takes a bit of time. So and that's kind of a bit annoying. Users might think that something has gone wrong with the service here, because essentially what we're doing here is we're fetching as much data as is available about that property, and essentially what we're therefore doing is requesting it via APIs from various different sources around the place. So we're fetching the mapping data, fetching the other data, and therefore to some extent we're at the mercy of those other servers to respond to that, and that kind of creates a slight sort of clunkiness in the user experience. Now, of course, we want to move into a future where, I think lots of the work that, for example, the Digital Land team, MHCLG, is driving in this direction towards a future where, data is really available, really fast. But in the meantime, there's a bunch of tricks that we think we're going to be able to pull, and actually Jess on our team is already working on one of them as we speak, to try and get rid of that kind of clunk, that kind of delay, and the danger of arriving here with data missing as well. So what we call a timeout. So we know that that's a risk at the moment, and we want to just improve the user experience around the kind of fetching of that data. Another thing that is very much on the radar for the future is that if I'm the owner of this house here, sure, my property is slap bang middle of the map, but it's still a bit hard to immediately at a glance identify which property is mine. So one of the things we'll be looking at some point, hopefully, will be bringing in a blue line boundary, which is automatically picking up and highlighting what is the property in question that we're talking about. And there's lots and lots of complexity in the space of GIS. The next thing that's worth mentioning is these planning constraints. So, well, you can see here building type. So that's a piece of data we need to, this is to do with navigating how we get that data from Ordnance Survey, but we very much want to be able to get building type automatically, which will mean that we don't need to ask users that question, i.e. what type of building is it? Any question we can not ask users because we already know the answer is a good thing. It's one of our kind of 6 foundational principles of digital planning services, is don't ask users for information we already have if it's available. And we can see also we're pulling in a range of these, but because of that lag at the moment, we are having to ration ourselves a little bit. And you'll see this in the journey that I'm going to do. We're going to see questions about things that in an ideal world, data does actually exist about them. But what we want to be able to do is shift to a thing where these are still loading in the background without impeding the user's progress through this journey. Again, this is part of the pages feature. We would like this note to just be appended onto the bottom of the previous page, actually, rather than a page in its own right. Yeah, as I mentioned before, we're kind of going to answer these questions. It'd be nice not to have to do that. We should be able to move straight on to draw the site outline. So this is one of the very clear boundaries. This component here, as we've talked about before, is one of the real game changers for this project, and hopefully is going to make people's lives a lot easier, but also would remove a significant source of invalidation. So a huge, statistically, when we've sort of sweated the data about what are the main reasons for invalid applications, the 2 biggest reasons historically are the incorrect or missing fee and an incorrectly drawn or missing location plan, even for really mundane reasons like there's a north point missing on the drawing or something like that. And this is a huge moment where shifting to data, not documents, is just kind of be a win-win for everything, because you don't need to choose the line color, you don't need to put a north point on a digital map, you just need to submit a boundary. But the use of this is very clunky. So in testing, we're really aware of a range of user issues around this. One is true of location plans as well, which is knowing what to draw. So there's lots and lots of complications about what should and shouldn't be included within the red site boundary. In truth, in the case of small projects, it's typically just the same as the property boundary, but there are nuances to it. And so making sure that our guidance is up to scratch is part of that. But the bigger issue is about the usability of this. We want it to work well on mobile devices. We want it to be able to be as accessible as possible, so people who have particular accessibility needs can use it as well as possible as well. And just generally sort of little guides as you go around, sort of telling you where to click next. And there is, there are solutions out there. People have done this quite well. So if you play with Google Earth, it does quite a good job of this. So looking at some of those patterns and precedents to improve the usability of this component is definitely on the radar. So moving into the about the project section. Yeah, this is all, feel reasonably comfortable with these sorts of things. But this one, so this is a really interesting thing, because this kind of free text box that asks for a description of the works is a real pain point for users in the current system. And this has come up again and again in our kind of user research. So at the moment, you just have to kind of write a description, but there's a very particular, and this description, by the way, is going, when you see a kind of planning notice on a lamppost, this description is the thing that's going to be written on there. So it's a very quick thing that allows people to see what's going on. But there is a very particular way of writing this, and those in the know it, but those who are not in the know don't. So it's actually quite intimidating to just be given a blank, a kind of blank box. So we've tried to put this kind of guidance in here. I'm not going to go to the trouble of writing. I'm just going to write test here. In fact, that kind of practice of moving from a kind of just a human written description, the main thing that this service is doing is actually next, it's asking the user to give us a structured description of their project in the form of selecting from these drop downs what it is that they want to do. So one of the things that's probably not on the near future, but on the longer future radar, is we've had lots of discussions about the idea of actually being able to, from this information, being able to automatically construct a project description automatically in a standardized format, which would hopefully remove a source of invalidation and take away a big pain point for users in future as well. So that's nice. This component here is, it sounds like I'm being a right downer, but I'm not. I'm all incredibly proud of all of this stuff, but being warts and all here. So this one as well is, again, in user research, this is a real linchpin moment because it's a new type of way of interacting with planning services. This planning service is sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, knowledge rich. So the Scottish Government called them smart digital services, which I think is a fair description as well. So the idea that because we're asking for structured data and that based on what you're doing, that will then tailor the relevant questions and feed, etc. from that. So it's really important that we do this. It's a new type of way of asking for information. But it presents its own challenges for people because people have to go through and they have to find what they need to find. They need to know, all right, do I need to exhaustively, if two things are similar, should I tick both? You know, or do I only tick one? And we've built it to be as kind of forgiving as possible. So if they tick both, it probably won't matter. They'll probably get the same questions anyway. But generally speaking, the principle we're hoping users will get for now is this idea: you only need to describe just enough to satisfy yourself that you have described your project, to make a description of your project. So this is definitely an area where there are short-term wins, and I think Steve is really going to focus on helping us spot and find some of those. But I'm sure there are also going to be some longer-term wins in terms of potentially changing the entire format for how we ask for this information. So in this case, we're going to go for, it was install equipment, wasn't it? Install a heat pump. And let's go through this thing. So we're now going to get a series of questions that are about the works that we want to do. Here's one I mentioned earlier: scheduled monument. This is just one of the things we've dropped off because we've rationed ourselves, because most people probably know if their building is a scheduled monument. As ever, you know, this is something that people, it seems, really like, just being able to have not just the questions but the reasons behind the questions. But we're really aware that the visibility of this thing is still too poor, so we're going to look at ways for how to make sure that every user immediately and intuitively understands that this information is available and they can call upon it whenever they like. And we'll look at different options at some point for how we can do that and make that, because this is really useful information. And this, you know, the link through to the legislation is a really important principle of transparency in how we're building these things. So it's for heating only. Illustrations, that's nice. Let's build one on the ground, shall we? We'll have one heat pump. Will there also be a wind turbine? No. Again, helpful illustrations, hopefully. Some slightly fuzzier ones here, but these are just from what's in the legislation. Okay, fine, some extra information. Oh dear, so we've gone through here, and that's not a very good example, is it? I've chosen some bad answers. Actually, it's quite a good opportunity here. So I've hit a bunch of no's, and what I should have done actually is said yes to those questions. So I'm just going to go back and say yes. Again, this is one of the extra things this service does. It's actually saying to people, hey, are you sure you want to proceed? Because based on the information you've given us, it looks like it's not going to be possible to issue a certificate of validation. So don't submit, don't pay a fee if it's going to get refused for really obvious reasons. It's like a pre-checking service, but people can override that if they want to. So in this case, let's say yes, 3 bags full. And now it should allow us to continue. Materials section, in this case, there's no materials that are relevant. But this is an interesting point. One of the things we've flagged is that some users may find being asked about materials in this way onerous. Equally, from the officer side, we're still sort of garnering more kind of feedback on exactly how useful this information is about materials, and in what cases it might be that we don't ask for materials in every case, maybe only in certain areas like conservation areas. So very much up for debate. Go through these. We're reasonably happy about these sections, more straightforward forms, but still with a sort of the dynamic forms, so that we can avoid asking people information that doesn't need to be asked. But we're reasonably happy with the way all of these work at the moment. And the same with these. Now, what you'll also notice, and I should actually mark as we go through here, is on the back button, we have a back button, so you can kind of go back and forth through the service anytime you wish. But another kind of fundamental feature is that if you went back, so to here, when you go back, your information is no longer there. Now that is fine. You've got to re-enter it anyway, but it can be a bit unsettling for users because it makes people think or makes people doubt that the data they're entering is being saved. So that's something that it's got one of the kind of deep dev tasks to be looked at as well, potentially in the future. I promise I will shut up soon. I'm taking up the space here. We're nearly there. Drawings, so a really key thing, this is where the pages feature will be really valuable, because one of the big things about this, and this is we're really gonna have to explore this further with users, is that we're taking this quite interesting step of saying, based on the work you're doing, these are the drawings we think that you need to give us. There are, I won't go into them too much now, but there are kind of complexities to this, because sometimes users might feel we're being asked to get for the same drawing twice and things like that. So the most important thing is that because people want to have that list, this is a moment where it's very likely that users do not want to see these one by one. They want to see them all together on a page, and the page constitutes essentially a list of, okay, these are all the drawings you need to go away and do, or ask your architect for, or whatever it might be. So they want to see that on the page, and there's a very high likelihood that they will use this moment in the service to go, aha, this is the list of required drawings, that's my shopping list. Go away and, you know, ask my architect or whoever it might be to prepare those, and then come back, upload them and carry on. A lot of professional agents, they do know this stuff, so they'll have already prepared a lot of these drawings already, but it's part of this kind of reciprocal way that this kind of service works, is that it doesn't just ask for information, it also gives the user information, and that's cool, that's fine. So let's quickly rattle away through these. Yeah, and again, we can sort of this sort of ability to dynamically adapt what drawings are required is hopefully something that people will really like. No, so you don't need those. No, no, and no. And also, again, in this case, we've got at the moment we've got the option to add a location plan as well. Why not, as an additional thing? And no thanks. And then we asked a series of questions, which is to do with how it's going to calculate the fee. All this we feel reasonably comfortable with something we've been sweating over the last few weeks. But there is one final thing, which is that when you do eventually get to, so we're going to kind of review the application, when you do get to the payment thing, at the moment this only links to generic information about planning fees, and obviously one of the things that we know that is a kind of user need in future will be giving people a more personalized breakdown. Now this is the actual service, and I'm not going to submit an actual application and spend £103 of my money, so I'll stop here. But I think you know, hopefully you get an idea there that even though we've got an MVP service, we've got a long sort of bucket list of things that, you know, we're going to be continuously looking to improve that, and the order, if you like, the prioritization of those things will be driven very much by the partners and collaborating together, who in turn will be very much informed by the feedback that we get from users. So we're really grateful for everyone who is actually using the service in this private beta phase. Every bit of feedback that you can give us, not just the obvious stuff like that didn't work or this was annoying, etc., but also general things of, well, actually I'd really like to see that improved. Send it directly to the partner authority that emailed you, or use this feedback widget within the service itself. It's going to be absolutely invaluable to helping us continue in the next phase of improving the project. And with that, at last, I will shut up. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. That was really great to see. So, yeah, as you can see there, it's not too late. If we go on to the next slide, we've got contact details if you want to give it a go. So if you have a lawful development certificate that you'd like to put through the tool, there's the contact. If you're in Buckinghamshire, Lambeth or Southwark, those are the 3 councils that are involved in the private beta trial. So there you can see the details, planning.digital@buckinghamshire.gov.uk. or digitalplanning@lambeth.gov.uk. There's a telephone number there as well, 020 7926 9955. And for Southwark, planningpolicy@southwark.gov.uk. So please do get in touch. We'd love to, as Alistair says, we need your feedback and your help and your support and your information to help us continue to improve the service that's being built. So we're now at the question and answer section of the today's show and tell. So Toby, over to you in the control room. Are there any comments or questions in the chat function?
Yes, we do have some questions today.
Yay.
First one is, hi, as a user, how do I know what constraints there are? Would clarifying this be helpful, as well as what there is not?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a very solid card that's sitting on our roadmap. Again, our roadmap is public. You can go to RIPA Digital. We'll try and make it more visible, actually, so you can get to it more easily. We work entirely in the open, so we want everyone to be able to see that. So this is a really important one. You're exactly right that at the moment it's kind of this rather grey list. So the two user needs we're aware of is, one, we want a little explanation that explains what a constraint is, because it's quite reasonable. Whether it's unreasonable to expect everyone to know what an Article 4 direction is, for example, if they've never heard of one before, and what it means for them. And yeah, also visually highlighting, frankly, when you've got one, because you matter a lot less if it doesn't apply to you, but actually what you want to do is just visually highlight in a brighter color, saying, oh, your building is listed, or you are in a conservation area. And so making the experience of that. But any other ideas that you have for kind of the information that you'd like to see from that, yeah, please do shout.
Thanks, Alistair. Go on, Toby.
Yes, there's some more questions too. In terms of Android, OS and Apple applications, how compatible is this platform? From experience, people using Apple devices tend to face some hiccups.
Oh, interesting. It runs in web browsers. So as long as you're running yeah, I saw the announcement this week mentioned an app, which wasn't entirely helpful. It runs in the web browser, just like a kind of any other website. And as long as you're using what's known as rather strangely as a modern web browser, so Apple Safari or Google Chrome, Edge, etc., etc. A few occasions we've spotted a few bugs and things on Edge. It should be fine. It doesn't currently run on Internet Explorer, which we're not all meant to be using anyway because it's being discontinued. But other than that, it should run fine on most devices and most web browsers. So we're aware of a couple of issues on mobile with the draw boundary component at the moment, but other than that, it should work. So if you are on a device and you are having of any sort and you're having any issues with it, yeah, please do let us know. When you actually use that feedback widget at the bottom of the page, it gives you the option to attach a screenshot, which is really good. But what it also does is it attaches a piece of data about what device you're using and what a web browser, and that's really, really valuable. It's not doing anything weird or invasive. Your actual data is masked out. So when you're providing that feedback, none of your actual data is being shared with the team. It is just picking up those key bits of data, and that's really, really useful. So if you are having an issue on a particular device or system, use that feedback that button, and we'll know about it so that we can try and fix it.
Okay, next question. Do users know that the drawings need to be uploaded separately? I have seen multiple elevations on one plan, but the system requires me to have different plans.
Yeah, this is again, I sort of touched on this but didn't go into much detail on it. This is one of the kind of known friction points for this. So so if you imagine there's sort of different approaches we could take to this, because one is to say, look, upload your drawings and then just tag it with what drawings are on this drawing. Because then if you've got multiple drawings on one page, it's not a problem, because you say, well, this is the front elevation and the side elevation, or whatever it might be. But the issue with that is it's quite difficult to do that and check that all the relevant drawings are there. So that's obviously one of the aims of this service, is to reduce the risk of an invalid planning application. So that in that case, it comes from the other direction. It says, right, these are the drawings we expect or need, based on the validation checklist. But as you say, that creates this issue of yeah, what if you put two drawings on the same page? So at the moment, there were a couple of bits of text in there, but at the moment, effectively what you have to do is upload the same drawing twice to two different slots, which is fine, but we realize it's not entirely intuitive, and it's not obvious, it's not kind of obvious, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. So again, that's one of the sort of things that I think is very much in contention for future prioritization, is looking if there's any things we can do to do that. And actually, Catherine, we were talking about this topic this week, and Catherine suggested quite immediately, it seemed like quite a sensible idea, which is we might include a button on upload that says, actually, I've already given you this drawing. So there might be smaller short-term things we can do to help with that. But yeah, thanks. It's a really good point.
Okay, one more. This is a message. Congratulations on reaching this important milestone. Then the question, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the project moving forwards?
I'll leave that one to someone else.
Okay, so who wants to jump in on that? There are lots of challenges. Go on, Emily, I can hear you talking.
No, I'm absolutely kind of metaphorically chomping at the bit. I think, understandably, I think the team recognise that there's functionality that users have identified that could obviously be not necessarily challenging to deliver, but will obviously bring potentially forward some more challenges. Certainly from my perspective with a background in planning policy, I think what would happen if more application types come forward is how does one incorporate planning policy into a system such as this? So whilst it might be challenging, I think it's a very exciting challenge for the team to kind of reconsider how we can make sort of policy easier to understand. Just like in this case, the GPDO has been made kind of easier to understand. But yes, I see some other hands have come up, so I will defer to other members of the team. So Pete, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just to say that it's excellent that RIPA can ask for and receive all of this information, and particularly a lot more data rather than documents under the existing systems. But all of that newly gathered data has to have a home. It has to be able to be processed by the planning authority. So the sister project to RIPA is BOPS, the back office planning system, and those two projects have to work hand in hand in order that everything that RIPA can do, BOPS can do too. So a big part of the work is making sure that the two applications can communicate properly and can capture and send the information from RIPA to BOPS, and then can be suitably processed by a case officer in BOPS to give a determination. So everything that you see manifest in RIPA, for example, okay, let's just have the applicant sort of supply multiple drawings on one document, which is exactly how it's done today, and probably therefore what applicants want to do in the future. It's okay, well, let's just get RIPA to fix it so that we can just allow that. Well, we have to then think of all the consequences of that in BOPS. Now, luckily on this occasion, the solution proposed would be met in BOPS, and that's not a problem. But other times it can be a lot more complicated than that. So that's not perhaps our biggest challenge, but it's certainly a really important consideration between the two projects in the future.
Thanks, Pete. So I'm quite interested to see whether any of the others, Rich from Camden, Frere, Southwark, and Kev from Buckinghamshire, any thoughts there from you? Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, just sort of reflecting probably on what Pete and Emily have said as well, is around sort of how we go and firstly scale it and the implications for scaling it. And obviously we've got quite a bit of, I can't remember how many changes there have been to the GDPR over the last few years, but it's quite a lot. And so that's only one element of it. Keeping up with that is quite hard. But then as we start to move into things like the Pathfinder programs around like local plans, and we're looking at like digital engagement, site notices, things like that, there's like a constantly evolving environment of emerging data standards and things. So trying to make sure that on this project we're keeping up and keeping aligned with those things and are helping to facilitate all of those other areas of movement is going to be a massive challenge, I think. But like Emily said, it's going to be like it's a really positive and exciting one, I think, and it gives us a chance to actually stitch the whole planning process together. At the moment, it's very siloed. So I think there's a real opportunity to sort of to actually pull the whole process together, make it more publicly accessible. But it's it is a big challenge as we move through and as we expand it. I think it's just the and scale it to other application types and stuff.
Thanks.
There is going to be that difficulty there.
So there's a lot of answers to that question. I hope that was interesting for the questioner. Toby, are there any other questions in the chat?
Just one more comment from the user who asked about uploading the drawings separately, and they've come back with a suggestion. How about an upload, then a validation checklist of what is included?
Yeah, I mean, there's something like that would be a really interesting way of making those two options meet in the middle. So, you know, fundamentally at the moment we had to choose a kind of binary path between asking the user what they wanted to give us and telling the user what we want from them. And as you say, there might be a way to try and sort of get some software to kind of do both, where essentially, yeah, you kind of allow the user, if I've understood what your suggestion right, allow the user to sort of upload what they want to upload and then say, oh, by the way, it looks like you haven't given us this. So I think, yeah, I suspect that will be the long-term, probably the long-term future, but that'll be a tricky one. I'm sure we can work out.
Brilliant, thanks, Alistair. Are those all the questions there then?
That's all the questions, thank you.
And just a quick throw out, anyone in the room wants to add anything, just shout out or put your hands up. But other than that, well, that brings us to the end of today's show and tell. So thanks very much for joining us. We are really excited to reach this stage, but as we've said, we have a long way to go. There's all the details again. RIPA.digital, should have put on there, but also box.digital is the back office planning system project website. If you want to see any of our past show and tells, there's the project link there. You can go to that. You'll also find all the old slide decks there. So if you want to actually click on any of the links that have been provided within the slide decks, you can go there. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, follow our blog. Please do, spread the word. And we hope to see you at our next show and tell. Thanks very much for joining us.